anti-Semitic, just to mention these things. That is absolutely disgusting, and these people belong in prison. There's no other way to see it. Rob Mandis, we've got a lot on that. Got a lot to chat about.
The baby tested positive for herpes, indicating the virus was in its nervous system, in his nervous system, with being a circumcision. So,
chat with about, because I mean, obviously that Kent letter yesterday was insane on air after a tweet, but I want to kind of hear the angle. Involved in any of the classified information that was forwarded in regards to wasn't. President Trump yesterday himself. Pretty new items added.
Are not delivered in the body of the right horse on regardless of the tyrant. But the win-win or a non-zero game because every freedom fighting tyrant fight for incredible product. We haven't tried ultimately blue. Incredible products available right now at thealexjonesstore.com. And they're going to $30 a month.
I do have a Zoom call coming up. I don't know if it's in 1 minute or in an hour and 1 minute, but I gotta check it out. I'm going to school today.
Special deals, commitment, special everything else. So anybody on should be at the have until the 17th of March to take advantage of the March mega sale at thealexjonesstore.com. So the biggest sales of the year yet, up to 40% off store wide, 25% off on the shirts, on the hats, 10% off.
I believe he had ribs broken, very violent attack. And so Ramshaw now throwing him. Let's see the prior comments made by Mullen. Take a listen.
The standard practice of this committee for the chairman to ask the nominees the following question. Do you agree with that reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear or testify before any committee of Congress if you're confirmed? I do. We'll now proceed to questioning. Should show a lack of contrition, no apology, no regrets, support, understand the violence that was perpetrated on me. Whether I met you somehow in the house, I don't think we ever met when you were in the house. And the only thing we're upset about is not that you were for violence. About it, I called you a liar. about this chief have. Ask you about the funding. It was this whole idea that you can transfer or you low impulse control. You decide that you're you on the private on the phone, there was no apology. You said, well, by six ribs broken, separated, finally upon bone on bone for months. Had one of my loan, and that's great. Still, the sheer lack of any kind of self-awareness that you're thousands of men and women have the use of force. A violent attack is just fine. So I guess my first question is, do you think that justifying the kind of violence sets a good example for the men and women of ICE?
Chairman, first of all, I didn't know the extent of damage. When the phone call was made, I tried to talk to you. You didn't engage at all. In fact, you said, get your paperwork in. It's got to be fine. Sir, actually, it wasn't. And I'm apologizing for pointing out your good. So jolly well fine. What the American public to violent attack on me from I did not say I supported it. I said I understood it. I saw it. Understand it. Interpret completely. Support for a conduct. Sir, as I said, we have our differences. It's not going to be doing my job as Secretary of Homeland Security. Kentucky as much as I am open. Let's go ahead and roll
We'll play the rest of that tape. We also saw that it's going to show in just a moment, right after we play that. Don't go anywhere.
I'm holding in my hand two compounds that are guaranteed to change your life. T3, pure atomic iodine, nobody else has it. It's next level. And blue, products together. Supercharged mitochondria cells, clean out the body, and are game changers. Iodine is essential, meaning you die without it. That have cognitive disabilities because of lack of iodine. You add supercharges everything. T3 is now available. DeltaStore.com. Very best iodine that we know of that exists. They're making better. We'll adopt that if we can. That's the cell we found. Now, right now, if you have a member, 50% off, regular customers, 25% off. It funds the info war, but more importantly, it is a game changer. If you don't take my advice and try this, you're insane. All you gotta do is try it, you'll be blown away. Take action now. DeltaSport.com. Take it. T3, now available. Amazon Blue at sport.com. With your host, Brianna Morello.
Right now. Are kind of having a little bit of a very
He understood the guy getting attacked.
several ribs of his partial portion. Well, Senator Mullen actually didn't defend him publicly, but instead actually justified the violence that was used against Rand Paul. And we figured this was going to come up because Rand Paul was the chair of this committee, but it didn't come up at the couple of seconds starting the confirmation. Let's take a listen because Rand Paul just tossed it down by the together of all of the things.
Oh. Any place, anytime, cowboy. So this is the time, this is the place. You want to run your mouth, we can be too consecutive. Also be here. Now. Oh, stop. No, sit down. Sit down. Okay. Oh, okay. Sit down. All right. Would you have got right there? I would have go to the doctor at that point. You have to be called out. It's just, silly, stupid, but every now and then you get punched in the face. Well, go back to the 1800s.
Cannings and duels.
4 times prior to that, and you'll say, yes, you're supposed to ignore it. Well, I'm not a very good Christian, and I don't say I prefer the David method. By the way, I'm not afraid of biting. I will bite. Bite? I'll bite, honey. Yeah, I'm in a fight. I'm going to bite. I'll do it. I'm not, and I don't care where I bite. By the way, it's just bite. No, I really don't.
I don't care where I bite. That's funny. I don't care where I bite. But don't make a plan to bite. But don't make a plan to bite.
As you can notice over my shoulder, my good friend Sean O'Brien, both of us had that conversation, shaking hands, and both agreed we could have done things different. Sean has become a close friend. We talk all the time. I've been on his podcast. We talked through this. That's how you handle your differences. Not like this, Chairman.
Oh, this is the same thing. Both speak.
Violence.
I don't agree with that. I don't believe in political violence. I've made that very clear. Sometimes, theoretically speaking, sir, I get it. It's about character assassination for you. That's the way this game is played. I understand it. And we're making this about you, which is fine, but that doesn't keep so that's somehow something I started. You're adding a lot to it. In the days after the fight, justify the violence is historically justified by precedents such as and is it today your opinion that the case is not only justified but argued still for resolving our differences with violence? What I would simply point out is some of the rules that still apply to this body.
Because it's going to be a little bit of a back and forth. We'll keep bringing, of course.
We have a Sumner County
Show. Figured that was going to be a big one. A big moment. Possible. But he still was not offering apology to the chairman of the committee. I don't know what that, but we'll pivot for a second here because tensions are very high in Washington D.C. It's not just the senator's confirmation and potentially leading DHS. It's also someone working sector. Joe Kent yesterday reported that Joe Kent had just released a resignation letter. The resignation letter apparently was sent over to President Trump. It outlined immediately happy with the I ran. Now, President Trump responded to that resignation letter. Click 5. Your director of national counterterrorism, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict. What's your reaction to that?
But I was very weak on security. I didn't know well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized it's a good thing because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was every country that put on as what a threat Iran was. The question is whether to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars have said years that presidents should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon. They were, if we didn't do the attack, or if I'll go a step further, if I didn't terminate the Iran nuclear, by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember when they said Boeing 757 loaded with cash, hundreds of millions of dollars. People have been very happy. This was a wonderful. They said hundreds of millions. People forget that. Does anybody remember? Right? You remember hundreds of millions of dollars in a Boeing 757. I think there are two of them. They took the seats out and they put cash. And it was so much that there wasn't a bank in Virginia, Maryland, or DC that had any money left. They stripped them of all their money, put it in place, sent it to Iran, almost as ransom. That's not going to happen with Trump. And nobody ever did anything about it. Nobody ever said anything. Can you imagine if I did that? So they've been a threat for a long time, but they've really been a threat. If I didn't terminate Obama's horrible deal with Iran nuclear deal, you would have had a nuclear war 4 years ago. You would have had nuclear holocaust, and you would have had it again if we didn't bomb the site. So somebody is working with that says they didn't think Iran was a we don't want those people because, and there are some people, I guess, that would say that, but they're not smart people or they're not savvy.
All right, so just keep in mind the president did nominate Joe Kent for his position. So when he says he's weak on security, and he's always thought that, that's a little concerning. Joining us discuss Colonel Rob Madden. He is someone with a lot of experience in the issue. He spent 32 years in the Air Force as a combat vet, and we're honored to have him back on the program today. Rob, thank you for being here, and thank you for standing by as we continue to dive into the several hearings that are going on right now in the Senate. But this is a big one. Yesterday, when we saw this letter get dropped on Twitter, I mean, my eyes were just like, he put all this in a resignation letter. And there's reports that on Monday, Kent and Gabbard met with the vice president, and the vice president, according to this report, did in fact tell him, like, hey, maybe you should be respectful in your resignation letter when Kent did fly this over to the VP. What was your reaction to the letter itself? Do you think it was respectful of the president?
I have to tell you, Brianna, as somebody whose Gator PAC supported Joe Kent in both of his runs for Congress, that I have interviewed him twice on my show, and what he is saying in the letter is the exact opposite of what he has said for years. And look, I'm not going to character assassinate him. The man's a Gold Star husband. He's got 11 combat tours himself. He served this country, but I'm going to question his judgment. And I am as shocked as you are when I saw this letter drop. You know, there's a way to do this stuff, especially when you're in a circumstance where the United States is conducting an industrial scale war against the country that you're mentioning in your resignation letter, and this was not it. So I support Joe in his nomination for the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, but I am questioning all of that at this point. Look, we've had 4 Islamic terrorist attacks, and one of them directly linked to Hezbollah, the one against the kids' school in Michigan, the attempt where the terrorist was fortunately killed by private security guards before he could blow his vehicle up and kill a bunch of kids with his AR. So this is a problem that goes far beyond just Joe Kent. He's given our enemy a tool and a set of tools to use against us in the propaganda part of the war, and he's now enabled the left and the media in the left to question judgment about the lack of leadership at the National Counterterrorism Center and his view on whether Iran is an imminent threat has direct bearing on these attacks that we've now seen. What is going on there, and are they doing their job to protect the American people? That should be the number one concern of the director of that facility.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I want to get to with all of this. Now, also to our audience, I announced it on X. We're expected to hear from Joe Kent directly tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. He will be appearing on Tucker Carlson's network, sitting down with Tucker, I'm told. So we'll be waiting for that to happen and kind of go through it once that conversation does begin. But there's a lot of reports in the White House officials leaking to the media that Kent was apparently not in on the discussions regarding Iran, that they in fact believe that he was a leaker, and that's the reason why they kind of shunned him from all of these discussions. Do you think that he didn't have, because yesterday when the news broke, I was telling our audience, folks, I mean, he's obviously getting classified information, sees the classified information that this administration tells us they were using to make this decision to strike Iran. So just bear with me. But now the White House is saying that he didn't have access to that information because they believe that he was a leaker. I mean, what do you make of that? Because obviously it's coming from both sides. They're both kind of contradicting one another. How do the American people kind of weigh in on this, knowing that the White House is denying the claim that he had access to this information? But apparently, I mean, it was his position. How would he not?
That's a great question, and it's. I made some calls yesterday when I first saw that being reported on social media to some folks that have been in direct contact with individuals in the White House over the subject, and I found out most disturbingly that apparently he's been denied access to classified information for many months now, and it all stems back from the Signalgate issue. He was the acting chief of staff for D&I Gabbard at that time and was her representative in that Signalgate chat. And that's where this stems back from. So that goes back to my NCC director's job, where I need to be protecting the United States of America at home here domestically from terrorism. And Islamist terrorism has now happened 4 times in the last few weeks on his watch, and he doesn't have access to classified information. I can't close the loop logically on that, and it makes no sense to me because he can't do his job, and his team can't do their job adequately if he doesn't have personal access to classified information. So I'm I go back to, I'm very concerned. Now I'm going to leave the CTC. We need somebody with a stick that has decades of experience of dealing with Islamic terrorism. And I haven't heard anything yet. Hopefully they've got somebody lined up really quick because this is a national emergency from my perspective, that this guy didn't have access to classified, and he was supposed to be running counterterrorism operations for the entire country. Something doesn't make sense here.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to make any sense. And by the way, Tulsi Gabbard's team, through background discussion,
History of service is beyond reproach, and sacrifice of his family is unspeakable. I don't even like to think about it. That's why I put that. However, her name is emblazoned on a plaque in a facility. I can't really talk about it when you read the story. It's a tough story to read. But again, as I said with others, the sacrifice is beyond reproach. That doesn't mean that this current opinion is any more fact-based, because it's not. I'm really sorry. I mean, I've read probably a lot more intelligence than he did, because they don't have a law enforcement function at the National Counterterrorism Center. They're an analytical clearinghouse. They're valuable. However, I've had access to just about everything. And how you could come to the conclusion that the Israelis did it and there was no imminent threat here? Really? What about the anti-ship ballistic missiles, the drone program?
60% enriched nuclear, their constant death to Americans chance. I mean, that's called evidence. In some limited circles, we call that, a clue. I mean, I don't know at what point you thought this wasn't an imminent threat after you've read a lot of the stuff I read. And by the way, that's just the open source stuff we can talk about on the air. I promise you, the president, I promise you, has a bevy of material that he can do the medical acting and erase your mind tomorrow. If he told you right now, you would come to the imminent threat conclusion in a snap.
All right, Rob, I kind of want you to weigh in on this and get your take because again, I've asked. Obviously, I do know that Iran is a threat, and I want to keep just reminding our audience I don't disagree with that claim. But this attack was launched while we're dealing with partial DHS shutdown, while we have known suspected terrorists into our country right now. And when I ran the numbers, I asked DHS for the numbers that have been arrested in regards to how many terrorists were released into the country by the Biden regime. Joe Kent threw out a number in December, and it was over 18,000 of them. When DHS responded to the number of how many were arrested, they've only captured 7.8% of those known and suspected terrorists. So when we look at this, I'm wondering, well, why would you launch this attack knowing that they're still here? The White House, the Pentagon saying that they can't tell me what they meant by imminent threat when in regards to all of this because it's classified information that they were dealing with. What do you make of all of this? Because I still have so many question marks in my head.
Yeah, unfortunately, in the classified realm, it's hard to argue with them when they tell you that. And I understand it. Look, I've been having a security clearance for most of my adult life since I was a teenager, so I understand that. But I believe the imminent threat was laid out by Marco Rubio in a answer to a question about how they were building this network of ballistic missile capability to shield their nuclear capability as they continue to refine that and develop it into weapons. That's what they were seeing, and unfortunately, there's no other detail in that. But Dan was absolutely right on that. It's a complete turnaround for Joe. And again, I'm not attacking his character from the perspective of his combat service or his loss. I get all that. I fully understand it. I support him. But the lack of judgment to put this letter out and hand our enemy in the middle of full-scale combat operation against them is really troubling to me. And then you combine that with the National Counterterrorism Center, and as Dan said, they pull all the information together, and he doesn't have access to classified information. It leads me to believe what I've believed for quite some time now, that our counterterrorism system in the United States under Homeland Security and the DI is broken. And that is much more than troubling. That's a national emergency in my mind, because the person over the NCC is pulling all of the analytics together, and then that gets fed out to action agencies like the FBI in order to take action. And if we're not arresting the known terrorists, which we've known about the 1,500 or so that came through the Biden era, if we haven't arrested all of them yet, then we've got to get into that apparatus and get that system fixed immediately in order to do that. And somebody has got to take over the NCTC that can work with all the other agencies and pull all that analysis together so we're all on the same page. And I just get the sense by observation and listening to all this that we're not on the same page. And that is an extreme threat to the average, everyday American. Look, a unit at McGill Air Force Base went FPCon Charlie, Force Protection Condition Charlie, last night. And that is an indicator that they are facing an imminent attack on the military installation. And this is happening across the country. So we've got to get our arms around this, and we've got to get somebody in that position very, very quickly that can do this job.
I want to ask you, Rob, spoke out earlier this morning. President Trump was obviously with their mission and he's responding to this, saying Trump is now asking for help for Iran. Just they launched this mission. They should have thought this through earlier, and I would warn against invoking Article 5 of the NATO treaty as well, which goes into saying, obviously, strategy or how this is going to continue. What do you make of a statement like that? Because he is asking other countries to step in on this, but I think it's more of the perspective of he's asking for them to help out in regards to transportation, in regards to logistics, oil, obviously trying to make its way to the region as well. And that's what he's asking. I don't think he's asking for military backup, is he?
Well, he's asking for a coalition to be built to do the escorting using combat vessels in the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf, that type of activity. But to say that this plan did not take into account the Straits of Hormuz is just ludicrous. Look, I've been doing planning against the country of Iran and the mullahs almost my entire Air Force career in one way or another, from the tactical to the strategic. And the Straits of Hormuz is always part of the operation. Now, look, this is industrial scale combat operations. It's a very complex system. The Iran mosaic defense system is very complex. That's why you see these rounds fired. Ships say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're on their own because we're not in touch with them. That's the plan," etc., etc. So it's a very complicated system that they're going after, and they had to follow a certain sequence of events and a sequence of targeting initially in order to get at that system and really disrupt it and destroy it so that our folks are not in danger. And you see, there's been no indication whatsoever of any aircraft being shot down or even fired that's capable of taking them down at this point. But to get back to the Straits of Hormuz, it's just a matter of priorities. It's always been part of the target list. It's always been part of the concern. But it's a tough nut to crack. The Iranians just have to make a threat, and you can see what happens. Their threat of mining, that's gone away, hasn't it? You haven't seen any indication whatsoever they've been able to put a mine in the water off of a fishing boat. Now, yesterday we attacked their
Robert, commercial break. If you wanted to stay right there, we'll have you in a second. Folks will be right back.
My people perish for lack of knowledge. That's what the Bible tells us. Another way to say it is, those that don't know history are doomed to repeat it. God has given us compounds in nature that aren't just important, they're vital. If you don't have oxygen for 4 minutes, you die. You don't have water for 4 or 5 days, you die. You don't have food for a month, you die. And why is that? Because there's essential. Well, iodine is one of these nutrients. We have massive shortages of it in our depleted soils. Now, I have a new CIA classified document I'm going to hit here in just a moment. But first, I'll show you a few headlines. Study 2 million people suffer from vitamin and mineral deficiencies, particularly iodine, the #1 cause of cognitive disabilities in the world today. Here's another one. Salt smarts. Now, iodine has increased America's IQs. Starting in the 20s, we had super low IQs like iodine. They put it in 15, 20 point increase. My point is, this is a known fact. It just got declassified 2 weeks ago. CIA Operation Artichoke in the 50s. They said he'd been tasked by the big tax-free foundations, the Rockefellers and Carnegies, to dumb down the American people. But we're going to put poisons in the food, the water, and the vaccines to dumb them down to make them more manageable. Absolutely incredible. So right here, ladies and gentlemen, I have taken a few drops of our new T3, even better than X2, pure atomic iodine, and mixed it with our medical grade methylene blue. Both of these supercharge your cells, clean out your body, and counter the effects of the things now being admitted by the CIA. That fluoride calcifies the pineal gland and jackets your cells where they cannot transmit. Now, I've been telling you this for decades. They have major studies, but now here it is. CIA declassified research. The human body is a liquid crystal that is literally transmitting and receiving a transceiver. And what does fluoride do? It literally blocks that. What goes in and strips that out? Iodine and methylene blue. They act in different ways. So this is information the bad guys not need to know. Also in the CIA document, they admit that most cancer is microscopic worms. There's hundreds of species that get it and colonize your body, amoebas, and eat your breast, your liver, your brain, you name it. And then they call it a tumor in cancer, but they're just areas of your body that have been chewed out. Now, you've seen us with countless doctors and scientists on talking about this. Not all cancer is this, but the majority of it from studies is, and they are again telling you that you just got to die. And if you've got an infection of parasites in your brain or whatever, if they hit it with radiation, it kills Parasites, lipid radiation also kills your regular cells. It turns out the majority of people in the world have one form or another of parasite. Here's the Daily Mail. CIA faces furious backlash after hidden document. Potential cure for cancer is declassified after 60 years. We've talked about this for many, many years. You're totally vindicated again. And right now, we finally have the original pure iodine back with even stronger, now known as T3. The original X2 even better at thealexjonesstore.com. Again, ladies and gentlemen, T3 and what it does for your body is amazing. So for a limited time, you can get T3, our new iodine, the very best ever, at thealexjonesstore.com. If you're a VIP member, for 50% off, regular customers 25% off at thealexjonesstore.com. It funds the operation, total win-win. Now, methylene blue you fill in 30 minutes on average. Iodine takes about 2 weeks to kick in to get the full effect, but it is just as amazing. You are insane. If you don't go to thealexjonesstore.com right now, you get our ultra methylene blue and the new T3. This is better than X2. The same formula, stronger. Exclusively available right now at thealexjonesstore.com. And thank you so much for your support.
You're tuned in to the American Journal with your host, Brianna Morello. Watch it live right now at band.video.
Welcome back to the American Journal. We're excited you're also with us today. We've got our eye right now on the Senate. But Colonel Rob Madness is still with us. And, we had our commercial break. We didn't want to cut him off. So I wanted to let him have the floor and his thoughts. So, Rob, all of you, as you tell our audience regarding the latest in Iran and the United States situation there.
And I appreciate you having me on. I was just going to say that, last night, in the last 24 hours anyway, we have destroyed a lot of their underground anti-ship missile firing positions in the Straits of Hormuz, which I was wondering if we're going to bring that target flow. But let's talk about the president for a second. Put a social post out. I wonder what off the Iranians if we let the people respond that coming out of the Persian Gulf take responsibility for protecting it, because quite frankly, the strategic situation for us and a lot of the West has changed, at least for the United States, because we're now becoming dominant and export gas again, like we were first President Trump administration. So the strategic calculus is totally different for the United States now. Quite frankly, I've even posited that they just close the Straits of Hormuz completely and eliminate this reason for being of all these people wringing their hands over the price of oil and those kind of things. Look, I'm willing to pay $5 a gallon for gas short term if that's what it takes, but the market will equalize at some point. If it were totally closed, then folks would start getting stuff from other places and other parts of the market. Yeah, I don't know why they're not cooperating. Oh, let me tell you why. They've spent decades reducing their navies down to nothing. They couldn't even get 3 ships into the Red Sea to help against the Houthis when shipping was being attacked by the Houthis. The one that did show up ended up having to leave early. So that's what I think is going on when the president asked them to do this. He's calling them out and showcasing their lack of ability to defend not only themselves, but the Straits of Hormuz, where they're getting a lot of their energy. So there's a lot more going on here than just the Iranians saying they want to close down the Straits of Hormuz. They have demonstrated they don't really have the capability to do. As a matter of fact, the first ships that were attacked there were their ships. They did it as a demonstration. So there's a lot more to come on this. I think the war is going as well as the war can be expected to go. The enemy always gets the vote. We have to remember that, Brianna. But the president seems to be operating on all cylinders. And I think we're going to see the right things happen. And we're 3 weeks into this. There's at least 2 weeks left on the original 5-week plan that the president said publicly as what it was. So it could go longer, it could go shorter, but I think they're right on track.
Yeah, we'll keep our eyes today. Thank you for your service folks, we're keeping our eye right now. Tulsi Gabbard actually. Let's listen in to see what Gabbard has to say. Recent conflicts to influence targeting and streamline decision making, underscoring the risks and likely threats that could manifest on the battlefield. Early developers in quantum computers will give countries an extraordinary technological advantage over others to quickly process national security information and break current encryption methods, sensitive finance.
What are you doing? No, the person's doing the dentist. Come on. It might be messed up.
And complex.
It might be all fucked up. Who knows?
More common and posing potential threats against U.S.
That bitch didn't start moving until you started.
Competition and regional powers are becoming more willing to use force to pursue their interests, heightening the risk of conflict. The IC assesses the space domain is becoming increasingly contested, with China and Russia developing counter space capabilities to challenge U.S. space efforts. The threat of proliferation and advancing chemical and biological warfare capabilities continues to grow. I'll turn to our neighborhood in the Western Hemisphere, flagging economies, high crime rates, pervasive organized crime, migration, corruption, narcotics trafficking. All of these present a spectrum of risks to U.S. interests. And competitors seek the IC assesses that Latin America and the Caribbean almost certainly will see spots of volatility in the coming.
Okay, guys.
Since Maduro's
Stay back and
arrest,
stuff now.
the IC assesses a shift in Venezuela's leadership towards cooperating with the U.S. to open its economy, to develop the country's oil and gas extraction capability, and we've seen their movement in releasing political prisoners. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement review in 2026 will likely increase uncertainty in many Latin American countries, especially those that rely on Mexico as an export destination for intermediate goods for manufacture and onward export to the U.S. China, Russia, and Iran are likely seeking to sustain economic, political, and military engagement in Latin America. The IC assesses that China's demand for raw materials is likely to continue to drive its economic outreach, but Russia likely wants to expand its current security and diplomatic ties with Cuba and Nicaragua. The IC assesses that China aims to elevate its own political, economic, military, and technological power to increase its own regional positioning, global influence, to fend off threats to their interests. While there are challenging areas where interests diverge, President Trump's diplomatic engagement with President Xi to work towards U.S. interests have enabled progress where those interests align. The IC assesses that China continues to rapidly modernize its military forces across all domains in pursuit of its goal to achieve world-class status by mid-century. This includes building a force with the aim of U.S. and allied forces and to achieve their stated objective of developing to seize Taiwan by force if necessary. However, the China likely prefers to set the conditions for an eventual peaceful reunification with Taiwan short of conflict. The IC assesses that an increasingly confident North Korean regime remains a source of concern regionally and globally. Its weapons of mass destruction, conventional military capabilities, illicit cyber activities, and demonstrated willingness to use asymmetric capabilities poses a threat to U.S. and its allies, particularly South Korea and Japan. North Korea's partnership with Russia is growing, and in 2025, Kim took steps to improve ties with China, still North Korea's most important trading partner and economic benefactor. The IC assesses that North Korea's support for Russia in the war against Ukraine has increased North Korea's capabilities, as their forces have gained combat experience in 21st century warfare, along with equipment. In 2024, North Korea deployed more than 11,000 troops to Russia to support combat operations in person. Pyongyang continues to develop and expand its strategic weapons programs, including missiles that can evade U.S. and regional missile defenses. It's continuing to work to increase its nuclear warhead stockpile and maintain biological and chemical weapons capabilities. Russia retains the capability to challenge U.S. interests globally by military and non-military means. Used by Russia to the potential for increased ongoing conflict that led to direct hostility.
What if our survival depended on you being quiet? I'm just saying. What if it did? I'm just saying.
The IC assesses that
Careful.
to invest in
Oh.
greater
No.
threat to the U.S.
No.
and forces
No,
abroad.
please. Please. Coming for
Advanced
your.
systems,
Gonna hold your
hypersonic
mouth.
missiles, and undersea capabilities designed to meet advantage. Moscow also relies on other tools to exert pressure, using gray zone tactics to further its goals and compete below the level of armed conflict.
Can you
Russia
get in
is
the
also
back?
building an extensive
Lay down.
counter-space capabilities to contest U.S. space dominance. Its development of a nuclear counter-space weapon poses the
Give
greatest
it back.
single threat to the world's space architecture.
Yep. Go.
During the past year, it assesses that Russia has maintained the upper hand in the war against Ukraine. U.S.-led negotiations between Moscow and Kiev
You picked
are
him up.
ongoing. Until such an agreement is met, Moscow is likely to continue fighting
In the
a
back.
slow war
Whoa.
of attrition
Stay in the back.
until the objectives have been achieved.
Thank you.
In the Middle East, conflict and instability will shape security, political, and economic dynamics in a variety of ways.
Oh, you want
The
some water?
IC assesses that Operation Execute is advancing fundamental change that began with Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023, and continued with the 12-day war last year, resulting in weakening Iran and its proxies. The IC assesses the regime in Iran appears to be intact but largely threatened due to attacks on its leadership and military capabilities. Its conventional military power projection capabilities have largely been destroyed, leaving limited options. Iran's strategic position has been significantly degraded. The U.S.-led maximum pressure campaign and snapback of European sanctions added additional pressure to an already Iranian economy, resulting in mass protests earlier this year that Tehran suppressed by killing thousands of protesters. Even if the regime remains intact, the IC assesses that internal tensions are likely to increase as Iran's economy worsens. Even so, Iran and its proxies continue to attack U.S. and allied interests. The IC assesses that if a hostile regime survives, it will likely seek to begin a years-long effort to rebuild its military muscles and forces. Prior to Operation Execute, the IC assesses Iran was trying to recover from the severe damage to its infrastructure sustained during the 12-day war and continued to refuse to comply with its nuclear obligations with the IAEA, giving them access to key facilities. The IC assesses that China, Russia, and North Korea see the United States as a strategic competitor and potential adversary. Iran has long viewed the U.S. as an adversary and is engaged in active conflict with the U.S. as of today. These four countries, the IC assesses, are likely to continue their selective cooperation with each other, which could bolster their individual capabilities and threats to U.S. interests more broadly. However, currently these relationships are primarily bilateral on selective issues and depend on broader circumstances, divergent sovereign interests, and in some cases, concerns over directly conflicting with the United States. These factors, the IC assesses, are relationships. Finally, conflicts on the continent of Africa are likely to persist through 2026 due to poor governance, economic demands, and external support. Tensions continue between Ethiopia and Kenya, which could rapidly accelerate conflict. Contentious national elections in Somalia could distract the federal government away from counterterrorism actions against Al-Shabaab, which continues to conduct terror attacks while providing funding and propaganda support to other elements of Al-Qaeda in Yemen. The civil war in Sudan continues, even as external negotiations occur. ISIS in West Africa and the Sahel have increased the intensity of their attacks against local security forces, expanding their areas of operation